What's cracking, mi gente? This your boy D once again, stopping by to drop a little bit of love and some knowledge. With that being said, you guys see that thumbnail? You guys see that uña? You guys know what I'm gonna be talking about. This was a long time coming. A video people keep asking me about. People keep asking me when I'm gonna do it, why I haven't talked about it. So here I am. There's a lot of people and a lot of questions regarding this famous click, and I'm here to give you guys my version how the click started. 20th Street, the famous 20th Street click, how all began. If I do get one thing or maybe two things not completely correct, don't hang me, just hang in there. Like I said, I get all my knowledge from people that were there at the beginning, the founders of the click, which happen to be some of my family members. Plus, I grew up around there, so around people around the neighborhood, so I know most of the story behind this click. But like I said, maybe throughout the years facts get a little twisted, or maybe people might say, oh, he wasn't there, he was there, or maybe whatever the reason might be. But it is what it is, and here it is. Before we get into this topic, you already know, subscribe, hit that like button, leave a comment. I'll make sure I get right back at you. With that said, let's get it. 20th Street click. 20th Street click in San Francisco, California. Northern California. So basically, you guys know the enemies were supposed to be norteños. And I say supposed to because I don't really believe there's an enemy out there no more. But I'm going to speak like if I was still part of that movement, so you guys can get the details and everything else that comes with it, right? So 20th Street was not, before it wasn't a gang territory. There wasn't too much gangs going on. You gotta understand, before we came along, there used to be a lot of Cubanos there. There used to be a lot of Nicoyas there. That they had their own problems going on back to their war when Nicaragua was going on there with the Sandinistas, all these little situations that were going on, you know. Plus, the Cubanos, they always been around there. They had little businesses, they had little shops, so there was all like that. We had Salvadorians there as well, so that's why we got along so well. Cuban, Salvadorian, us. Honduras came around a little bit late, just like Guatemalans, but it was almost 20th Street was the money maker. Well, that's where people used to make money, either for selling stolen goods, selling a little bit of weed, or doing your thing, you know. So before we moved to the actual 20th Street, back in the days when the click first started, it didn't start it as basically 20th Street. That's not what it started at. Before we became 20th Street Misioneros from the mission, there was homies that were parqueros from the park. We never had cliques like that. Oh, you from the mission, you from the parquero. But a lot of homies were inside of us. We used to joke around. Oh, I'm a parquero, homie. I grew up in the park. Like myself, I grew up in the park, so I consider myself a parquero when I was a kid. But then at the time when my career took off of gangbanging, I started kicking in the mission. But most of the time, it was in the park. And that park happened to be 850 in Valencia. It was between 19 and 20. That was the little park. We used to call it Little Park because they had the Dolores Park, which is a bigger park back then. But before we even got to that place, we used to be right there in 20th and Bryan. There used to be a soccer court there. We used to go out there and play. And that's where the hate and the animosity between 20th Street and 22B, 22nd and Bryan comes from. And plus, you know, some of their founders were Salvadorians and Hondurans. So that was a lot to do with it. Well, 20th Street click wasn't, again, like I said, there used to be a lot of homies just kicking it there, doing their things, making money. And then early 90s, I want to say late 80s, about 88, around 90, homies from LA came over here. Like I said, my family was storing, so a lot of people decide to branch out once the cliques over there start going into the different directions. And that's where this topic is coming from, because a lot of cliques from LA came to different cities. A lot of homies from different cliques came to different cities, and I was playing about how the split happened in LA back in the days. I got a video coming up. Just be patient. But see, we used to kick it in the park because a lot of us play soccer. A lot of the old homies play soccer, so we used to be intrigued by the scores. So at that time, That's what there was happening. A lot of incident. A lot of homeboys were getting deported back to El Salvador. A lot of homeboys were getting done dirty in the counties and the prison system and YA. So there were a few individuals that came back home and started a so-called MS13. I'll get into that. To do with that. So some of the homies from LA landed here. My uncle was one of them back in the day. So we had old school people like, Ivan. I want to say this. Due to respect that I still have, as on cariño that I have from people, I won't mention too many names. And please don't think somebody got on my ear that told me stop naming. No, 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 no. It just, I have a lot of love for a lot of people. A lot of them dudes are doing their family things, and I gotta respect that. I gave them a call, asked them if I could use the name. They respectfully asked me not to. They'd rather just remain anonymous. Even though they did their time and everything, I have to respect that. Because like I told you, if one of you guys were to come and tell me a story, I won't come up here and be like, oh, the homie so-and-so told me this, and that happened. I have to respect their decisions. So before I did this video, that's why it took me a little minute, because I had to touch bases with a lot of homeboys. Of course, it's already been put in paperwork due to trial motions and everything like that. This public knowledge. If you guys don't like it, well, it depends on homie, but it's public knowledge that's been there with the indictment that happened, with the Operation Double Horns that happened, plus the other two indictments that happened after that. So it's public knowledge. But at the time, there was a lot of old homies that had a lot to do with them. Tun Tun was one of them. And then there used to be Luis Memo, which rests in soul in peace. That's why I say there's a lot of people involved here. I would talk about his case, how he got gunned down in front of his kid. It was a fucked up situation, but it happened. It was Memo, El Viejo Tigre, the old man, Ivan Serna, Joyo, and there was a couple other individuals, the Homeboy Psycho, that were part of this whole organization that was trying to become a 20th Street clique, that was trying to become the Clica. And there was the homeboy from Normandy, Power for Normandy. There was a few individuals from LA clique that had a say so when 20th Street got established. Some people don't like to admit that we had a little bit of help from the homies from LA, but it's true, it's fact. I'm gonna speak it. Power was one of the individuals that first came to San Francisco with the homie Diablito from Parkview. And they were hanging around there, and they saw an opportunity to start playing soccer. They start hanging out with the homeboys. Yeah, there were already people claiming 20th Street and Brian, basically, because they were homeboys that were surrounded. They grew up in the Mission. Tigre, Ivan, all of those dudes, they were there, So I cannot say they weren't there from the beginning, because they were. It's a simple fact. But the homeboys came and started putting the idea of a mess. La Mara Salvatrucha. We can build a clique here. We can make a lot of money. So before the incidents between us and the Norteños start taking place, that's where we used to kick it at, 20 and Brian. That's why the saying becomes, we're Brianteros first. We used to be from Bryan Street, 20th and Bryan. And the 2-2B boys, now 22nd and Bryan, they don't like to hear this. But we were the first Brianteros. We were the first Bryan boys. We were the first dudes that claimed Bryan, because we used to kick it there. 2-2B wasn't even a neighborhood back then. They weren't even in there. I think they used to kick it in 21st in Alabama and 21st in New Hampshire, and there was different little areas. So they weren't really a barrio or a clique out of the northern neighborhood. They were just dudes, individuals just like us, regulars. So they start getting this idea of, let's make a clique. They start claiming La Mara. And there was a lot of homies that got caught time. Big Bago, back then, rest in soul in peace, they got killed. The homeboy Mahmoud, rest in soul in peace, almost got killed. Those dudes were the older heads. Memo, rest in soul in peace, Mahmoud. There was the homie McFly back then. I can't say homie because he became an informant, but McFly was around back then like that. There was a lot of individuals. The names are long forgotten. If you ask somebody from 20th Street Click, these names, they don't sound familiar to them because they don't take the time to get educated. Something they're banging me. I love learning new things. You can teach me something new, I will learn something new every day. But it became that way. Then they start getting locked up. Caballo, which they call it Little Pony before. He got sent away. Big Snoopy, one of the Martinez brothers. That dude was around that era when 20th Street was claiming Snoopy was one of the founders of 20th Street clique, if you call it as a clique, when it became found though, and we start claiming MS. 20th Street clique, that's when the founders came in. Snoopy, the homeboys, Kosi. There was a couple individuals, um, Ivan, Memo, Mamu, McFly, Bago. There was a lot of homeboys there. They had something to do. There was a homeboy from Pasadena. When their family things and asked me not to name it, so I respect that. But there was a lot of individuals that had a lot to do with the 20th Street gang created. So when 20th Street started making themselves known as a gang, as a Mareros, was in the early 90s. Now I believe it was 90, 91. We start kicking it, we start claiming the neighborhood, we start doing their thing. That's when the animosity start kicking off. But it wasn't really with the norteños, I can say, homie, but it wasn't really much with them. We had a problem once we moved from 20th and Bryan. We moved to 20th Street and Mission. So that's when we started hanging out in front of Rimo Latino, across the street from La Farmacia Remedio. People from San Francisco will know these areas. So we used to kick it around there, and we used to kick it over there at the Little Park as well. A lot of people will go to the streets, kick it, make our presence be known. Then we go to the park, and a lot of homies used to play soccer on their fields because they had a soccer field back then. So we go play soccer, kick it, and then go back to the street. That's what we used to do around my time. So a lot of homies grew up in the park. I used to see a lot of kids come with their dads. They were homeboys. Me, I used to go with my uncles, and we used to kick it in the park. So me, I consider myself a parquero. But at the same time, my career took off in Mission Street. So I was a misionero as well. So, but I never took a term to that. I just was always 20th Street Locotes, and it was what it was. 20th Street began having problems with the norteños. LNS 24th Street. They start giving us a little issue. We start banging on them. We start rushing and we start fighting. Before it used to be fighting, fist fighting, stabbings, bats, and all that stuff. That's what it was. And later on, graduated to gun shooting, stuff like that. But we didn't have just one beef at that time. In 95 to 96, there was a couple homeboys they haven't mentioned. Rudy, old guy Rudy, Big Trucho. Those homeboys, you gotta understand, a lot of the homies from MS were ex-military guys or ex-guerrilleros. They knew hand-to-hand combat. They knew how to get down. So at that time, 19th Street Clique had just became 19th Street, and they had a called Barrio Mexicanos. Locotes, they had BMLs, Barrio Mexicanos. And there was a few individuals that didn't like the homeboys for the simple fact that we weren't look up on, oh, you guys are the shit, you guys are Salvadorians, you guys are nothing, there's not going to be another motto over here. Fuck that, it's going to be 19. Before that, it was 17th Street with the 18s fighting. But then a lot of the dudes from 17th Street created that neighborhood, 19's Consville, 19, now they call it SFM 19, and they united with 6th Street. There's not BLs no more, Consvilles, or they had a different cliques, but before the first clique that came out on 19th Street was BMLs, Barrio Mexicano Locos, you know? So them dudes used to bang. There was an individual in that clique that started a huge war between 20th Street and 19, Quesadilla. And I saw one of those videos, I think it was called Hood Stories. They do attribute that to the norteños. That it had nothing to do with the norteños. It had to do with two individuals that are now in prison serving time behind that murder. So I won't go into details because I will make a series, 3 videos about this. How 20th Street come and when the Operation Double Horn took place. But I'm giving you guys a little background right now to get deep into the details, you know what I mean? I'm setting the bait. But it was what it was. So we used to go at it with the dudes from LNS. There was a lot of vicious individuals, Salvadorians they knew the homies from the streets when we were fighting the war. A lot of them fools were ex-military. See, the homie Rudy and Trucho, them dudes were vicious with their hands. Them dudes were vicious. They had hands for days. They were training hand-to-hand combat when they were in the army in El Salvador when we broke off the war in 92 and 93. The war ended in El Salvador, the Civil War. So a lot of them dudes, they had defected and became AWOL. The war military came before the war ended because of what the military was doing over there. And a lot of the homies was guerrilleros, ex-guerrilla members. So they had experience of hand-to-hand combat, fighting with weapons, stuff like that. They know how to use guns. So they took that military mindset and started installing it into the homies from 20th Street. At that time, the homies from 20, like I said, they were beefing with the dudes from 24, the LNS. That's what the first priority. Then 21st in Alabama came into play and they start beefing with us. So we start going back and forward. And we have casualties, they will have casualties, and it will go back and forward. So it wasn't a they hit us, we go back and hit them. It was always a back and forth. And then when 22nd and Bryan became about, half of the neighborhood, or at least the dudes from back then, they create 22nd and Bryan. To my knowledge, there were two ex MS13 members, and that's when MS14 started coming about in the mid 94, 95. When before we got into it, the dudes were 19, and there happened to be a couple homeboys, Frosty, Sapo, a couple dudes that had done prison terms from LA that did not like how the program had treated them, basically the SUR program. So they decided to start a new barrio, a new clique. They still wanted to claim the MS because they had the letters on them, but they didn't want to claim the 13 because at the time the stuff was going on over there in Lake County, they were getting smashed. So they felt like, why should we represent something that they don't even welcome us on? So they start using the 14 because they were in Northern California. And kind of like give them a little props to the Norteños for splitting up before that. You got to remember, we live in San Francisco. When Nuestra Raza Park became about, most of the NF dudes, they came out 26 in Nuestra Raza Park, you know? Them dudes used to kick it there. We used to see all them dudes back in the days when we used to have the low riders cars and all those situations. We used to have low riders cars coming down, the shows and all that stuff. That shit used to be beautiful, man. But then gangs became about, shootings started taking place, and then things started getting canceled. So that's why those things got canceled and those things didn't go along no more. MS14 came about the picture, so they started trying to hit us. The homies started doing the same thing back. They didn't leave up. So now we had 24th and Mission, 22nd and Bryan, that were MS14, they were claiming MS14, 21st in Alabama, and later on 30th Street or Persia Street start adding themselves. We didn't really have that much issue with 14 and Natoma because they had to go through all 19 and 16 anyways, and 16 will start to become a neighborhood. So they were already established themselves as well back in the 90s. So they had to go through all those neighbors to come and do something to us. So that we didn't really have a strong beef with them, but we still kept an eye out for them. 20th Street started becoming a vicious gang. They started doing hits, operations that will explain a lot of the murders, attempted murders and stuff like that happened. So the homos were no play. I can tell you, the older heads, they were no joke. Their fools were vicious too. The dudes would come down. So I saw one time, like in 98, when I was a kid, I was kicking it right there with my uncle, and I saw a truck full of Norteños just pull up. And I tell you this, that surprised me because back then it was a little bit more like that, gangbang and fist fighting, or like bats or bottles being thrown instead of shooting each other and stabbing the shit out of each other. So I see this truck full of Norteños pull up, about 9, 10 of them deep. Then another car with at least another 6 of them. And all the older homies right there in 20th Street, right between the Leaders Chicken. Famous chicken in the Mission District, man. Back in the days, that line used to be crazy. So, those pull up and get bang in Puro Norte. The homies like, what? F that, homie, la mara. So, they start chunking. Those start really going at it mano a mano, homie. I never seen things like that. They start going at it blow to blow, chunking, just getting it in. And it surprised me because it wasn't even like, oh, let's pull out a knife and let's get it. It was just a full out bro fist fighting. And I'm like a kid. I was a kid back then. I'm looking at this big ass dudes fighting, because there was some big ass dudes too. I can't lie. They just getting it in. People getting dropped, getting back up, drop, getting back up. And throughout the whole course, I just keep seeing a little short guy just keep getting, every time they will kick the shit out of it, he just keep jumping up and down and up and down. That happened to be my uncle because he was a little midget. He was a little short dude. But I asked him, I say, I know y'all stay with it. Why not take it to that level? He's like, look, they came down, they squared up. Man is a man at the end of the day. We got into it. We start chunking it. It's what it is. That's the most beautiful thing you can do. If you had a beef with somebody, chunk it up. Fight. So that stuck with me. So I used to do that all the time. My uncle used to beat the shit out of me. He used to bully me. And he used to be like, fight back. So I started getting used to fighting. I used to love playing hands. I used to love to go to the gym and just hit the bag. That was my thing. So that's why I got in trouble a lot. In prison, in the county, juvenile hall. because I used to love fighting. I used to love chunk. Yeah, I used to lose fights sometimes because I wasn't perfect, but most of my fights I had it with doubly. I had hands, and I was told by the best that dude was a military guy. He was a trained military guy, and the homie Rudy Trucho used to come to the house and they used to teach me. They used to beat the shit out of me, but I used to learn. These fools were so vicious they would wrap me around in a blanket, hang me on my feet in the middle of the garage, and you start using me as a punching bag. And if I cry, I still get whooped. So I couldn't cry. I mean, the blanket used to save me from the hard blows, but they made a man out of me. So I started doing that. I started learning. But see, one thing I learned about them was like never to bully somebody. Never, like, if you broke the spirit, don't keep doing it. Don't be that much of a person. And I seen that a lot, and it changed. And that's one thing that bothered me when the homo rest in soul in peace Memo started doing that. I will say this about him and Joyo and Tigre. They had a habit of slapping homies. And that was something that a lot of homeboys didn't like. A lot of homeboys didn't like. They used to line up homeboys, literally line up homies that were trying to come kick and become homeboys and just slap him. Just give him one piece, blah. And they would expect the homeboys to fight back. I mean, their mentality was like, if you can find me, then how you gonna find the enemy? But at the same time, I used to see it like, if they take off on you, you got your rock dogs, their fools are gonna demolish it. So they didn't take off, and plus you're the older homie. So I didn't believe in installing that tactic, and a lot of people didn't, but those individuals did. And that was one something that took Memo to that situation when he got murdered in front of his son, because one individual that killed him, he was kicking up with us, and then later became a norteño, and he had it out for him because he had slapped him a couple times, not taking that man's life. So, I mean, other people tell a different story, but somebody close to me happened to be on the phone with him that day when that happened. Plus, somebody has seen him a day before, and I have witnessed most of the stuff that happened. And the person that saw when that fool got killed, there was a lot of people around it, and I believe there was a video of it, if I'm not mistaken. But there was a lot of incidents going on, and that incident got that man killed. There's a lot of details that I'll speak about it a little bit into deep, but that's how it became. Then 20th Street Click started spending. Little by little, 20th Street Click started spending. We started having from 20 members to 30 members to 50 members. So by the time when Operation Devil Horns 2008 came about, 20th Street had become increasingly violent. The violence had increased under the new leadership of the homeboys. And it's all in paperwork. I'm not saying something that's not being put in paperwork and was proven in courts. Yes, the homeboys that took over the clique when in 2005 all the way to 2008, and people that were having those advisors, they push a hard line. They push like, we're gonna show that we're not scared with maderos, we're gonna do this, we're gonna hit them with vestes, and this is what we're gonna do. So their standards, like, if you're gonna come kick it with us, you gotta show us what you got. And it became violent. I can't say nothing about a lot of violence was done throughout the neighborhood. And that's when the feds started getting involved around 2005, 2006, 2007. That's when a lot of incidents were happening. That's when Mickey started becoming an informant. So Mickey started becoming an informant when all the incident happened. Then his nephew started becoming an informant right after him, the family Martinez. And like I said, 20th Street started becoming a dangerous neighborhood. There was a lot of people. Yeah, there was a lot of things that happened with 20th Street. The people would get beat up and everything like that. But it was not something that we did out of fun. It was something that was done